All right, everybody. I tried to record this yesterday on Monday, but my camera was acting up and I don't care anymore. So we're just going to record it, get it going. Top four from the Ace Arena 3 that was this last Sunday. We're starting with fourth place Kevin Broberg, who used Calvin Harrigal's third place Nick Reagan deck. So it says third place Calvin Harrigal, but he just sent me a screenshot of Calvin's deck list used for this event. So if you've been paying attention, this is the all Nick Reagan that focuses a lot on passing its checks. It's got Final Smash in there. It's got Dark Interruption. It's got ways to guarantee the check, but there's also Besiege, Spirit Gun Final, True 100%. I want to say it's your standard Nick Reagan fare, but you know, there's a little bit of spice. We've got Lethal Slash. Almost every attack draws cards. Every attack that doesn't draw cards is really, really tricky to deal with, like Besiege, or adds a million stats like Spirit Gun Final and True 100% Unleashed. I'm really curious if the Spirit Gun Final e-commit ever really comes into play. Committing 3 foundations for 5 speed is not a bad rate, but it's usually not what this type of deck is trying to do. So you'd have to be like in a checkmate scenario. But if you ever play a True 100% or Spirit Gun and either double up or stitch them onto each other, I could see it happening. Other than that, I mean, defensively, there's kind of nothing going on. I don't want to say absolutely nothing, because in our game every card is a block and there's always cute little tricks you can do. You know, theoretically Nick Reagan can ready a foundation on defense, which could be really strong, but no one's really taking advantage of that defensively. We've got Haughty, which is cool because no one ever really played that card before, but now everything is such a big dunk. Haughty can ready itself if your attacks damage is 10 or more. Loot Box is cool because it's ramp, and it's not a card you see played too often, and it does add a card to hand. So Nick Reagan's not strictly like I have to turn 2 people or not at all, but yeah, definitely not a lot going for the long game here. Always Cool counts as defense. Hacker Extraordinaire, there's assets everywhere. Pass-through walls is a 6 check, and assets are everywhere. And this is, you know, a string deck most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't look like that, because sometimes you just stitch True 100% onto something turn 2, turn 3, and then next turn you double up a Patchwork Baby or something, and it doesn't look like a string deck at all. But Breaker is supposedly one of the ways you can fight back against this deck, although not the best. Radiant Visage is pretty cool here. You don't see this card being used as much as it probably should by now. Just a 1 diff that hates on momentum is pretty important as well, especially if you're expecting Mitchell Chiminos, which I think only 1 signed up for the Ace Arena. I'll have to double check that, but there is not the Mitchell Chimino representation I was kind of expecting, which the deck is a little more difficult to get into the winning positions than Nick Reagan, but also really strong. So either way, this is a deck you're probably familiar with. Very, very simple game plan of put the big stats onto the moves, pass all the checks. It sounds very simple, but there's a lot of different lines you can take. There's a lot of very small micro decisions that actually change how turns play out, and they're not super duper obvious unless you're watching the deck in, you know, be played. So it's difficult to really comment more on a 100 card deck. But I will say Fashion Icon in the sideboard, absolutely super cool adaptation. I don't know if this was in the Denver list with the Fashion Icon. I think they were all attacks in the sideboard, but Fashion Icon was starting to look pretty good throughout this tournament. Third place, we have Gavin Folsom with Rodan. Little Void Rodan action. This is another deck that you're probably really familiar with. I think this is exactly the Denver list. I could be totally wrong, but 2 Barrier Shield sounds familiar. Excuse me, 2 Barrier Shield in the main, Genkai's in the side, VMEs. Oh, I think Andrew Poor had mainboarded the VMEs, and he said that he would have rather sided them, or he was siding them out like all day. So there's definitely some differences here, but I remember Porat was like playing Space Terror at one point, and I'm just not a fan of this zero. But it does add damage, which is something Rodan needs, and it is a zero, which is something Rodan needs. But I really like Master's Pride. So unless it was for the block zone, I really like Master's Pride when you're playing Rejuvenating Smash. It makes it feel like a 4 diff. Not super duper consistent, but I also played High Velocity Slice, so there's a lot of differences between what I like to play in Rodan and what this Rodan list is playing for Gavin here. Gavin likes treasure hunting, which is cool. It's just extra card draw form speed, super super strong for these decks that aren't just folding and dying on turn 2. Red Right's the coolest, give you a little bit of that extra damage pump late in a turn when you really need it. Nonagon, really powerful. 4 Aaron sidestep, 4 Mikasa defeats the female Titan, maybe the only character that can afford to be playing 4 of these cards each. Very, very powerful stuff, especially when you have the rezone from VME, but the card advantage on Void is so good. You almost always have the correct block zone anyways. I do miss the days when we were playing like 3 Eyes of EA. I thought that combo was really cool, but without combined firepower and with the card draw that this deck typically has access to, it doesn't feel super necessary. But the one thing I will say is only 1 hacker mainboarded feels kind of bad. I think that should be a 2 or a 3 just because of the general format we're in, but it ended up being correct for this event because, again, not a ton of Mitchell Chiminos. Didn't see a Terrian Darrington, so Hacker wasn't the pivotal card in this specific tournament, but this tournament was not a lot of people. If you're going to a regional, I might suggest a little bit more Hacker. Then we've got second place Reiner Braun, played by David Toombs. He was very excited about this deck, and it did better than I thought. When he announced the character name, I can't lie, I was a little skeptical, but watching him play Chomp on turn 1 going second a whole lot of times definitely changed my mind. This deck is very much like a 4 checks good stuff with a damage reduction backup plan. I'm very curious what this deck looked like with Immortal Shapeshifter. I feel like Immortal Shapeshifter getting banned actually kind of hurt this deck. There's a chance he wasn't playing it before, but the amount of times that this deck destroys a foundation for damage reduction makes me think that gaining some life would have felt really, really good. So, but we've got 4 Squad Mates Betrayal because it's a 6 check that DRs. We've got 4 Enormous Acts. It refunds all of our sacrifices. We've got 2 Disrespectful Banter because this deck is all about the D build. Final Words is in here. Taguro's Dominance is more D build, so very, very much on the take away your stage plan. And the two biggest assets that you really have when you're trying to destroy the rival stage is usually going to be having big high speed attacks, right? If you can nuke all of their resets and you take care of like the problem foundations, basically, just having like the raw stats from cards like Armored Titan attacks and Knockdown Blow and stuff like that is enough. These are like the lower end of the 4 check typal difficulty curve. So the attack lineup looks a little fraudulent. I'm not gonna lie, it looks a little fraudulent, but we saw David do some amazing things with just 2 foundations and Knockdown Blow. We saw him be able to string together, I think it was 2 or 3 attacks, but just put like 20 damage together off 2 foundations. So that low difficulty curve really helps when you're basically going 1 for 1, right? Like Taguro's Dominance, I destroy 1, you destroy 1. Final Words, I destroy 1, you destroy 1. Even Chomp on turn 1, in a way, is 1 less foundation that I'm going to build, but it's 1 less foundation that you get to have. So really min-maxing, the amount of foundations that you get to run the game with, and then saying, well, my attacks are just going to be generically statted better than yours. Reiner, of course, pretty good at reducing damage on face, and he runs a very interesting mini game, sort of, where once you flip, you don't get repeatable damage reduction. So the E commit reduce damage to 1 is really nice into like the Smiling Titan style decks. But flipping against the Nick Reagan style decks and even the Rodan style decks where they play like 4 or 5 attacks in a turn, and with Rodan especially, they're like way too fast to block. It was really interesting seeing and hearing about how like he was winning games without even transforming. So that's very cool. But this is all just basically predicated on how greedy you can be with 4 check attacks and how just the raw stats work in combination with resource denial. So very cool stuff. I'd love to see this play against like a Tarion or like a Mitchell Chimino, because I feel like Tarion wouldn't actually be able to pass checks. So be interesting to see. But then first place, Justin Birch, everyone's favorite American, on Smiling Titan. He's been talking about Smiling Titan being good for a while. A lot of people don't believe him. I could see it. I could definitely see this being like a bracket spoiler. It fights Rodan's speed good enough, and the moves are again like generically well statted enough that you don't have to be doing anything super impressive. But the biggest thing is the death symbol gets access to all of the no hands defense, and I guess one card hand. It's like the one card hand defense you get. Always cool. Invincible body. Invincible body is not unique. We've got 4 of that, right? So having 4 damage resets in your stage is just enough to like win the race. Last second rescue is in here. It's pretty easy to get momentum when you're sending 12 speed pokes turn 2 at people. The league interview to help you pass checks. I'm a little surprised that one's only had a 2 of. But he definitely didn't need it once he got his ramp and things like that going, because we've also got 4 always cool, 4 weapon clash. So a lot of the death good stuff in both of these decks. In both of these decks, kind of just sort of relying on the fact that the 4 check attacks work really, really good in tandem with resource denial, because a lot of the game plan from this deck appeared to be, at least when we watched it, was play big move that destroys foundations from the rival, that makes it essentially 1 speed faster, right? If you get a ready foundation. The Colossus Titan's destructive power destroys 1 and makes him commit 1. So if it's turn 2 into your rival's ready board, that's basically like 2 speed for this attack that you're giving, plus permanent speed later in the game. So Colossus Titan's destructive power looked to be like the best attack from this deck by far, because it basically is statted in a way that Smiling Titan already has the damage. It's a 7 speed for 13, and Smiling Titan can add 5 speed or 5 damage to it. So if your rival plays out their hand, they overcommit and they're not playing to block anyways, you just have an 18 damage move, which is insane. And if it's turn 2 and they built 5, you're gonna destroy 1, you're gonna commit 1. They actually built 3. Can they block a 7 speed move with 3 resources? Potentially, but they can't block a 12 speed move with just 3 resources. So this deck really put a linchpin on a lot of different strategies. This is another one that I think is well suited into the Tarion Darringtons and the Mitchell Chiminos, the more asset heavy decks. I guess Mitchell's not an asset heavy deck. He just really relies on that 1. It's super important to get rid of the VME most of the time. But either way, this was really cool to see pop off. It played some really close games. It played some very, very close games, but being able to just sort of win that race, right? Being able to be like that 1 turn ahead, being able to play your whole hand and basically fight back against the resource denial that Reiner was doing. Because Reiner also has to sacrifice his own foundations to play defense. So the finals, despite being able to pop off with only 2 foundations in 1 game, the finals was a deck that is denying resources in like a 1-for-1 way and also sacrificing its own foundations for benefit because of that 1-for-1 trade, versus a deck that is just destroying your foundations and building way better. And I think that was the biggest difference between Justin's game plan and David's game plan. Is Justin was able to build 4 or 5 foundations like every turn. And there was a lot of turns where David would play 2 attacks and build 2. And that was really the biggest difference, is who got the bigger stage, who overcame the resource denial. But there you have it. That's the top 4 from Ace Arena. Are the Titan characters here to stay? Are these characters still too good post-errata? Are you going to play a resource denial deck in Webcam Warriors coming up April 27th? I don't know, guys. You tell me down in the comments below. Which of these decks was your favorite?